Welcome back. Batman Arkham Asylum is not only the first game in the Arkham series, but also the one we probably know the most about when it comes to its cut content. The cut content has become as intertwined with the game's lore as the fact that the metal detector works in Arkham Mansion, and because of that there are so many different versions of this game which could have been made. Cut characters, enemy types, locations, and icons are all found in the game, and the game we could have got will still linger in fans' minds for years to come. But I'm not happy not getting everything. I want it all, and I want it now. So while Rocksteady work on Batman Arkham insert buzzword, I'm going to be taking you back to 2009, using cut content, new ideas, and fan theories to create Batman Arkham Asylum, but better. Subscribe, we're pushing for 5,000 subscribers this year, so hit the subscribe button for more Arkham content, like the video, and now into a few disclaimers before we get into this rewrite. This won't be a complete rewrite. The plot will largely follow the main plot. My aim here is to use cut content and some ideas of my own to make Arkham Asylum better, or at least a little different than before. Number 2, I am not a game designer. The ideas presented in this video are all purely theoretical, but I will try my best to keep these ideas semi-realistic. Number 3, this video is not to knock Arkham Asylum at all. I love Arkham Asylum so much, and like many other Batman fans around my age, I went through the LEGO Batman to Arkham Asylum pipeline, so don't get butthurt in the comments if I change something you love, keep it civil and we can talk about anything I've done here. I'm also not a writer, but I am a Batman fan, meaning that I may take arcs from other media and mould it into my own story. This is also not an attempt to outright Paul Dini. This is just fun, and changes might be made to set up a potential CBA GRU, or a Cardi Batman Arkham game rewrite universe. Number 4, a lot of my ideas won't have perfect visual representation on screen. I'll do my absolute best to make it all make sense on screen, but just give me a bit of leeway if the footage doesn't quite match up with what I'm talking about. I won't be outlining every single combat and stealth encounter here either, so place those in where you see fit, because this is primarily a story rewrite. Number 5, hindsight is a beautiful thing. There's a lot of things here where I make callbacks back to Arkham Origins, and call forwards to Arkham Knight and Arkham City, which obviously at the time Rocksteady couldn't do, so I do have a bit of an advantage there. And number 6, just keep things civil. The aim with my version of the Arkham Asylum story is to really mess Batman up, similar to a serious house on serious Earth. I want tonight to fundamentally change Batman and who he thinks he is. I want the night to wear him down and leave lasting scars on everyone involved. It will be a burden on both his psyche and his physical being, because I don't think, after all he went through, Batman was affected a huge amount from the effects of the Joker's Island takeover, and in my mind this should be a night in his career which makes him have serious introspective thoughts on what he is and who he is. And on the physical side, I want Batman to be exhausted by the night's end, not like completely dead on the floor crawling away, but fed up. Like if one more person steps up to him, he will snap. So to achieve this, we'll be leaning much further into the Asylum's horror and its otherworldly aura to get the desired effect. And that's basically all the setup we need. There's a few things in here which won't quite make as much sense unless I do an Arkham City rewrite, which definitely might be on the horizon if this does well, so tell me if you want that after you've watched this in the comments, because I am fully down to do like a whole Arkham universe rewrite, because I feel like that could be really cool to try and do. But yeah, stick around till the end, see what you think, and let's get into it. We get the classic Arkham Asylum opening scene. The whole opening sequence up to getting to the asylum is largely the same. Batman is confident, calm and collected, and Joker is in the passenger seat, giggling and doing his usual stick. And we get the iconic shot of the island as the camera pans up, with one very big change. The lighthouse off the coast of Arkham West is very visible and very big, with a giant bridge connecting it to the island. The doors open and Batman pushes Joker into the asylum as Warden Quincy Sharp says, "Welcome home," to which Joker replies, "I think he's talking to you, Bats," before laughing as he's strapped to the gurney, and the slow walk through the asylum begins. We get the credits and the usual opening, except Batman is stopped before the security scan, the guards being insistent he can't go in there because he might unsettle the more violent inmates. Batman stops as Gordon comes out of the staff locker room and greets Batman, shaking his hand, and we get the the same conversation from the main game, as he essentially tells the guards to shut up and let Batman and himself through, to which they obviously oblige, and they follow Joker and his entourage of guards from pretty far back, discussing the new security features added since Joker last escaped. We can hear Joker telling the doctor doing the checkup he finds it absolutely hilarious that hundreds of his men were moved here following Firefly's attack on Blackgate. In the original game, a fire broke out at Blackgate, leading to Joker's men all being brought to Arkham. Here though, Firefly attacked the prison and told police it was Joker's fault before being transported to Iron Heights. Batman tells Gordon all of this as they continue following the Joker. All of this exposition takes place in the time it takes Joker to be medically examined, and I think this is a nice way to utilise our greatest power in this rewrite, which is hindsight, as we already make our first link back into Arkham Origins with Joker paying Linz handsomely, and we get that nice little lunge forward by Jay just to put everyone on edge. Killer Croc shows up as normal, and then we get to Joker's escape. Batman is once again stopped at the gate, not being able to go any further with Gordon, as the Joker is taken away. He escapes from the guards and Doctor, he snaps a guard's neck, beats the other to death with a baton, and pushes the Doctor over the edge of the barrier, because why not? That abyss is too cool not to be mentioned. Batman breaks through the window right when Joker gets through the electrified fence, which is opened by Harley Quinn, who's in the control room. We then get our combat tutorial as per usual. Batman leaves the room as Joker tells him he won't go anywhere he doesn't want him to, and instead of using Zsasz to introduce the player to the basics of stealth, we'll be using someone a little less important to this story, because in this version Victor Zsasz will be a bigger part of the story. Not much bigger, but big enough to keep him away from one-hit tutorial boss fights. So instead, we'll delve into the character bios and use the Great White Shark, who has a gun to a guard's head. This also gives our detective mode tutorial where we identify Great White Shark as an armed threat, because he glows red. Harley Quinn then comes on the monitor and shows us not only her outfit, but her hostage, Commissioner Gordon, not Quincy Sharp. And on top of this, she tells Batman that the bridge into Arkham Island is closed. This section of the game works largely the same, and it remains this way, gas room and all, until we hit the first Titan fight. Joker, however, this time doesn't let Batman take a free shot with the Batarang. In fact, he just shoots Batman in the chest as the Titan Thug appears and charges at Batman, allowing the monster to throw bats around a little as Joker outlines his plans for Batman's quote-unquote homecoming, finishing by saying he has an appointment with the good doctor that he simply can't afford to miss, as he then disappears into the area he goes into in the real game, and Batman finally gets the upper hand on the Titan Thug. Titans will work the same here in that their moveset will largely remain unchanged, and throwing batarangs to stun them will remain the primary way of defeating them. However, this one in particular does not die from a heart attack. Batman takes him down after managing to trick him into one of the electrified fences, which may or may not kill him, but his eyes do implode like in the main game. So we're like 10 minutes in and Batman's already killed someone, maybe, who knows? I do want to sort of hint that the Titan formula is not perfected though. Each Titan enhanced thug that we fight is a tad smarter than the last. This one is just a hulking brute. The next one has some instruction following skills, the next is a tad more tactically minded, until the final Titan fight where we're essentially fighting giant Banes. Anyway, Batman gets into the control room but can't open the door Joker went through. However, he can open the door behind him, so does, and this is where Joker comes on screen to show Batman the footage of Gordon being whacked, and so Batman heads into the room where it happened to find clues. It's worth noting that in this story, Batman won't have outside help. Now I know this is a bit of probably a controversial change, because Batman kind of relies on outside help a fair bit, but for this story specifically, I just don't think it works. Oracle won't be making an appearance, and Alfred is probably on holiday or something. Basically, he's trapped and alone. The only help he has is on the island in the form of Gordon and any living guards. This fixes for me one of Asylum's biggest issues. The biggest plot points of the game are mostly solved by Oracle googling the answers, and to lean into the more unforgiving nature of the evening's events, Batman needs to be both physically and mentally challenged, not just helped by Oracle. On the way to the crime scene, Batman's inner monologue reveals to us that all this seems fishy. It wasn't a simple breakout attempt, and Joker clearly wants to prove something to Batman. If he wanted to be out of here by now, he would be, but this has been planned. Quinn's on the inside controlling the security gate. Bowles has kidnapped Gordon. This was clearly planned for a long time with excruciating detail. The Blackgate attack, the inside knowledge, the bombs isolating the island from the mainland with the bridge blowing up. Joker had clearly been planning this for a long time. Batman makes it to the place where Gordon was hit and finds a whiskey flask. We get our first introduction to the detective features, and since this is the first game in the series, we're not going to change much here. All I'd change is having a manual filter selection just to give the illusion that the player has some extra input to kind of serve that Batman immersion. As Batman scans the flask and isolates the whiskey trail in the air, a light starts flashing and a loud alarm goes off, warning Batman of a high-risk patient's cell opening. Joker has let Zsasz out of the cage, and we watch as the camera feed shows Victor Zsasz leaving the cell and entering the halls of the intensive treatment. Batman begins tracking the whiskey trail to find Gordon, and we get a cutscene of Victor Zsasz scraping a knife he found lodged in a guard's head along the walls, calling for Arkham's little piggies to come out and play. This is our first boss fight. It's a game of cat and mouse against Victor Zsasz in intensive treatment. The fight begins with Zsasz and Batman meeting on either end of a corridor, and Zsasz charges at Batman with his knife, and the player just has to dodge over him and land a few hits before disappearing into a vent and getting the jump on Victor, before repeating this charge and dodge sequence. It only takes a couple of takedowns, maybe 3 to 5, but when Zsasz is down, he tells Batman he'll be back to make him squeal, and that he can smell fear on Batman. Batman knocks him out and leaves him in a cell, breaking the lock on the outside so he can't get out. We carry on following the whiskey trail and end up at the point Harley Quinn shows up and drops an elevator on Batman, and the guard who's waiting there. And we begin to climb up to the top of the building. Harley Quinn tells Batman he needs to wait down there until they're ready, but Batman begins scaling the building, and this is where we get our advanced movement tutorial. The game basically stays the same here until we get out to Arkham Island. The scene plays out the same and Batman begins the long glide down to the island's surface, finally outside. The Batmobile is being attacked and Batman heads to go save his car, taking out some thugs on the way with a couple of silent takedowns. We get to the car, defend its honour with takedowns and attacks galore, and go into the trunk to collect our first gadget, that being the Sonic Batarang. This isn't a change for change's sake, this is actually going to be fairly important later, so just stick with me here. Joker comes over the loudspeaker and says, "Sorry about the car, Bats. Me and Harley couldn't have you trying to get out of this madhouse before your big party. After all of this is for your legacy." Batman then finds Gordon's pipe. He knows Oracle gave it to him as a birthday present, and he wouldn't have left this if it wasn't taken from him. He was leaving a trail. And again, the trail leads us through the island and over to Arkham West, where we got our first glimpse of the lighthouse we saw in the opening. It's large, like huge, and towers over most of the buildings on the island, aside from a few, and it's only connected to the island by the giant suspension bridge, which seems to be outlasting the rough sea below. We can also find an ambulance covered in what seems to be blood. This will be important later because, as some of the cut content shows, I want each Scarecrow encounter to be preceded by something covered in blood. So the cut content shows Crane filling a bucket with blood and then throwing it over a statue, presumably the statue of Quincy Sharp near Arkham Manor. My idea would be to have each of the 3 Scarecrow encounters hinted to by blood being found covering a part of the set dressing outside of where the encounter would take place. For example, here the ambulance is covered in blood, hinting to the fact that the first encounter will take place around the morgue. We then get to the second encounter in Arkham Mansion, where we'll be able to find a memorial dedicated to Thomas and Martha Wayne's contribution to the asylum, covered in blood, hinting that the next encounter will mostly be inside Bruce's own mind, recounting his parents' deaths. And finally, the last encounter in intensive treatment, well, I think we can have some fun with that. I propose that just before you re-enter intensive treatment, you can find a box, and depending what console you're playing on, the box changes. Xbox just has a wooden box with an X on it, and PlayStation has a P with a little cube symbol next to it. And obviously both are covered in blood to symbolise the upcoming fake console crash, because spoiler alert, that's staying. I know this might be a little on the nose and a little cheesy, but it's fun, and we know the Arkham games are no stranger to these fun little nods, so that's my idea. Batman follows the trail into the medical facility, keeping the same interaction from before with Harley and Gordon if the player goes in the wrong way. This time though, to get in the facility, Batman heads through a vent in the roof, but still enters into the same section as in the main game since we don't have the explosive gel. We enter the medical facility and go through the vents and pick up this Riddler trophy because we didn't cut ourselves on that sharply observed portrait back in intensive treatment. I'd feel dirty messing around with the Riddler, so he's staying as he is. And we then enter the most iconic stealth room in the Arkham franchise, the Sanatorium. For me, the medical facility is where we first see the brutality of Arkham Asylum. It just oozes Arkham's patented misery and horror. The spikes poke from the walls like claws, the floors and ceilings are grimy and unkempt, and of course in the lower section of the sanatorium, we can find Killer Croc's old cell. The whole thing is the epitome of Arkham Asylum's aura, and so we'll keep it relatively untouched, aside from a few more drops of blood and a couple of dead guards because we need to hit that R rating. Batman sees the doctors of the building being rounded up and questions this, finding it strange Joker would care for doctors of all people. Batman clears the room and uses the Sonic Batarang to get a couple of takedowns, because we're going to rework how the Sonic Batarang works. So it kind of works like the normal Batarang and won't take up a gadget slot, rather it's an enhancement to the normal Batarang, so you can switch between the two on the fly. And it'll emit a signal which deafens thugs, which leaves them open for takedowns. So to make that work a bit more, we're going to add a few more enemies into the arena so the player can really get to grips with the stealth mechanics and this new gadget. Upgrades will also allow the Sonic Batarang to be used as a projectile, which can be detonated to get a free takedown, and it can also jam the collar-wearing enemies later on in the game, so Joker can't alert his men to their missing comrades. After taking the thugs out and rescuing the doctors, they tell Batman about the 3 kidnapped doctors, and the fact that the armed thugs took Gordon into the elevator, which has since been powered down. Batman heads off deeper in the medical facility to find Doctors Chen, Kellerman and Young, all of which are in some sort of predicament. Batman begins heading towards Dr. Kellerman and Aaron Cash, who are stuck in the control room of the patient observation area surrounded by Joker's gas. This works the same as the main game, and the pair are rescued with Cash and Batman talking like old friends who've done this kind of thing before Batman finds Dr. Chen, who was in the surgery theatre, and again this plays out the same. Batman then heads to find Dr. Young, who's been surrounded by armed thugs. And we have to get a little creative to save her, using the Sonic Batarang to deafen the guarding thugs before we drop in and take them out with our fists. This acts as a test of the player's nerve and skill under stressful situations. There'd only be about 3 of them, but still that's 3 armed thugs that need to be taken down within quick succession without being shot or Young will die. I'm not sure if this would work, but I think it could with some refinement. I just kind of like the idea of testing the player early on, that stealth situations might not always go their way, and this kind of gives them a feel for how that feels. Batman rescues Young, and Young tells Batman that she was studying the Joker for months, and Warden Sharp was adamant he wanted Joker back in the asylum and cured as soon as possible, to make his bid for mayor look better. She mentions that he was almost ecstatic when he found out Batman was en route to Arkham Island with Mr. J. Batman begins returning back to the sanatorium to try and head down the elevator to continue tracking Commissioner Gordon, and on his way back we come across the newest addition to our enemy pool, the high security henchmen. These guys will work the exact same, there's nothing really more to say here, they're the same. You stun them, you hit them, you take them down. On the way back to the sanatorium, Joker comes over the speaker, telling Batman he is absolutely full of excitement. He's been trying to keep this quiet all night, but he can't anymore, and he's got 2 friends ready to greet Batman. One is simply going to be broken in 2 if Batman doesn't say hello, and the other, well, he's terrified Batman might leave without saying hello. Batman makes it back to the sanatorium and is met with the doctors, and then Dr. Young and Aaron Cash. Young tells Batman she desperately needs to get to Arkham Mansion to find the notes regarding the project she'd been working on. Batman advises against it, but Cash insists that it'll get her there. The elevator begins coming up, and the doctors hide as Cash and Young leave the room, as Batman takes a perch atop a gargoyle and takes down the 3 thugs. Or, if you're a seasoned Arkham veteran, you can just ignore them and glide straight into the elevator.
Ice in the fucking veins, mate! Fucking have that, you cunt! Send that to your fucking friends!
Batman gets into the elevator and begins heading down to the guts of the medical facility. Joker comes on screen and begins taunting Batman about how he could just kill him now, but this isn't why he's done all of this tonight. No. Joker says this is all about one thing: proving Batman is right at home here, in the Asylum. Joker continues telling Batman how he doesn't think they're very different. They both dress up, they both go about their lives with an almost obsessive approach to their quest for justice and chaos, but then he stops, telling Batman he should relax and that he's in the hands of a pretty good doctor. The intro cutscene to Scarecrow stays the same. This scene is so cool and doesn't need to be touched. My only changes for this initial Scarecrow encounter are the colour palette and the beetles crawling out of the wall. First of all, the colour palette will be red while in Crane's world. Cut content shows us that originally Scarecrow's world was supposed to be raining blood and have a dark red colour palette. So we'll be using that. We'll also be making the beetles come out of the wall a little bit bigger because it'll look cooler. The fight plays out the same and really leans into the horror aspect of the character of Scarecrow. After Batman gets the best of Crane using the bat signal, he's visibly shaken, the screen still flickering in and out of Scarecrow's world, very, very briefly, but for the most part, the effects have worn off Batman. After seeing his mother and father's dead body pleading with him to save him though, he's shaken. The next combat encounter mixes up Batman's moveset, he's slightly more violent, and the special combo takedown, if it's unlocked at this point, are just that bit more cringe-inducing. Think like the takedowns in the Mad Max game, crunchy and brutal. He doesn't go fully into neck snapping and bone shattering, but maybe throw a knee to the jaw or a quick broken leg or two. But that's how I kind of want the Scarecrow sections to feel. The next two Scarecrow sections are heavily changed up, but this one I just wanted to keep because I think as a package, this is the most iconic of the three sections, and I think it just works really well. Say, the next two are basically completely different, but for this one I kind of just wanted to give the player a nice introduction to Scarecrow, to kind of let you know that, you know, you're not invincible. You might be Batman, but you're not invincible. Batman carries on through the bowels of the medical facility and finds Gordon being held hostage by Harley. This stealth section is one of the more memorable sections in the game for me. At least, well, the added stipulation of not being able to be seen or Gordon dies is one of the most memorable parts of the game. You have to take thugs down quickly or they'll realise their friends are missing. But this section is super cool. And after it, Batman crashes through the ceiling, takes down Harley, rescues Gordon who's bloodied and beaten, and Gordon tells Batman he's happy to see him, and Batman replies that he doesn't think he can stop Joker this time. He's out of control and sending everyone after Batman. Gordon tells Batman that they aren't alone and someone, or something, is down there, waiting for them. And Joker appears on screen, scolding Gordon for talking and ruining the surprise. The pair go downstairs to see what's waiting for them, and see Solomon Grundy. It's Bane. They find Bane. They find Bane with a label on the canister next to him labelled Patient X. So I had initially toyed with this being Grundy or Croc or someone else big who makes some kind of sense. But with where the story has to go with the Titan formula, Bane is kind of the launching point for that and is kind of integral to that. So we keep Bane, but please hold your applause for this. It's Arkham Origins Bane. Now, a few small caveats. He is slightly skinnier when he's strung up than he is in Arkham Origins before he takes TM1. He's also still pretty smart. Like, not Arkham Origins smart because years of Venom abuse has wrecked his brain, but he's still pretty smart. He isn't just a hulking moron. Joker pumps him full of an unknown substance. It's Titan. And so the fight begins. Gordon runs and Batman begins warding Bane off as Bane throws Batman around like a rag doll. Bane reminds Batman of Blackgate, telling him that if it wasn't for his fancy gloves, he'd have killed him there and then. To which Batman responds that he beat Bane because he's smarter than him. And this enrages Bane and he begins throwing punches at Batman, which he manages to just about dodge before being picked up and thrown through a wall. Straight into one of only a few new locations in this rewrite. An endless, mindlessly senseless mass of corridors. I don't know where it is. It's just the concept for the boss fight. I don't know where this sense of corridors is, but it's there. This is basically a rerun of Bane's TN1 fight in Origins with one small addition. Batman, still feeling the effects of fear toxin, hallucinates ever so briefly at least, fake Banes, which can be taken out of the equation using the sonic batarang, which since it emits a certain frequency, takes the hallucinations out of the fight, with the trade-off being the real Bane knows where you are from the batarang. He breaks the batarang and then begins tracking where he thinks Batman is from where it's come from, because again, Bane is smart. The stealth mechanics act pretty much the same. Batman gets the jump on Bane, cuts his tubes, jumps back into the vent. This happens a few times before on the last attempt, Bane loses his collective shit, throwing his weight around left and right and eventually brings the roof down on the pair as Batman manages to find a gap and grapple out, leaving Bane in the rubble. Batman meets back up with Gordon on the surface as Bane breaks his way to the top. Grabbing Batman as he knocks Gordon out of the way, Bane, leaking Titan, gets Batman above his head in the classic Nightfall pose as Bane says last time, whenever last time was a fluke. This time, he'll break him forever. But Batman says that this time, he's going to break him, as he stabs Bane in the arm with a batarang, rolls out of the hold before Bane begins losing more and more mass, as the Batmobile smashes Bane into a wall. The Batmobile reverses and Bane returns to his quote-unquote normal form, as he utters, "Es la bruja," before he falls unconscious. It's important to note the OG Batmobile doesn't die here! It's fine, it hit Bane as he's weakened, and in my headcanon it survives that sort of hit daily, so it lives to fight another day. No Bat Tank in the Arkham Knight rewrite! Gordon doesn't leave the island this time, instead securing the medical facility with the doctors and a few guards, using it as a relatively safe space. Gordon asks Batman what Bane said before he was knocked out, and Batman replies that he said, "It's the witch." Batman pieces two and two together, being the world's greatest detective and all, and figures that La Bruja must come from someone who worked on Bane. He figures he needs to head to the Batcave at Dead Man's Point to run some files, and cross-reference anyone who worked on the enhanced Venom while Bane was in the Asylum. He tells Gordon all of this before Gordon first questions how the hell he got a base on Arkham Island, and then wishes Batman good luck, and Gordon heads back into the medical facility to begin securing it. Before heading to Dead Man's Point, I think we should take a little detour to the Visitor Centre. The Visitor Centre is easily one of my favourite parts of Arkham Asylum. It gives Joker a chance to really get into Batman's head and recount the night's events until that point. It also, in our case, gives Joker time to talk to Batman about why he thinks Batman is not much better, if any better, than the people he brings into the asylum. We're going to keep this similar in the sense we can visit the centre after each major plot beat and get some exposition or character moments from Joker, but I want them to be a bit more probing. Like, Joker really debunks Batman's whole shtick, twisting and warping his ideologies and coming at Batman from the perspective of someone he failed to save. Someone who perhaps died at the hands of Joker or Bane or Two-Face or Firefly or anyone else who Batman might have inadvertently created. These moments will allow the player to breathe, get some background on a few characters, and let the mythos of Batman really be brought into question. Moving on to Dead Man's Point, and this doesn't change at all. Batman does that cool glide down to the front door, gets in, and makes his way to his gaming station. Batman begins cross-referencing Asylum doctors on the island, who worked on both the Venom-like substance and Patient X, and only one name comes up, Dr. Penelope Young. Young had been experimenting on Bane while working on a project called Titan. Batman accesses Young's account and discovers payments from a man called Joe King, one of Joker's newest aliases. I was so proud of that when I made it, and now reading that back it hurts. Anyway, Young was working on Titan, and her research was being funded by Joker, but at some point the payments were being declined. Young backed out of the project, but Joker, never one to do a job halfway, began trying to threaten Young over email, sending her pictures of dead babies, her own apartment, and pictures which looked like a woman lying on the floor in a pool of her own blood. Batman deduces, being the world's greatest detective again, that Young stopped working on the formula for Titan. Joker kept paying her, but she declined. Young then gets threatened but doesn't continue. Joker wants the formula, so gets himself brought back to Arkham, and a few months of planning, and bang, here we are now. With Joker trying to get his hands on the rest of Dr. Young's formula to create, in Batman's words, an army of 1,000 Banes. Hi there, so quick intermission. I have to admit this story wasn't going to follow the game's main story a lot, if at all, initially. I had this grand idea to try and interweave the Spirit of Arkham tablet storyline into the main plot, while trying to keep the main plot alive, but I ran into one glaring issue, which created cut content in a cut content rewrite. That issue being, my two antagonist motives wouldn't line up or make sense to coincide. So initially, I wanted Quincy Sharp to think he was the spirit of Amadeus Arkham, and want to kill Batman for trying to stand in his way of becoming Gotham's true saviour, killing his major fear of bats brought on by visions of Amadeus killing his mother and seeing a bat crash through his window after being obsessed with his memoirs, and killing Gotham's actual saviour. So he gets Batman on the island by telling the Joker to get himself caught and return to the island in exchange for free reign to do what he must to kill Batman, before Sharp would try and kill the Joker in the final act. Obviously this wouldn't work and Batman would defeat Joker and Sharp would be killed somehow, but this whole plotline completely contradicted Joker's carefully planned takeover of the island, the Titan plot, and the point of this rewrite initially was to make small to medium changes to the plot while adding in cut content, a few ideas of my own. So ultimately, I decided to cut this out. If you are interested though, here's the tablets that Batman would have discovered throughout the game, and what they would have said, which would have ultimately led to discovering Sharp as the whole mastermind behind the Knight's Offence. I'll leave these on screen so you can read them if you're interested. If you're not, let's get back to the story. Batman picks up his newest gadget, the Batclaw, which works the same as the main game, and remembers Young said she was heading to Arkham Mansion to get her notes, and begins scaling the viaduct up to the surface to the island. As he's heading up, we can hear growls and sniffs coming from below. Remember, we're in Killer Croc's territory, and this is a nice little hint to his upcoming boss fight. It also puts the player on edge that maybe Croc might appear at some point. After getting to the surface and making our way to Arkham Mansion, we find the thugs have broken into the armory and are now patrolling the island with snipers and assault rifles, and so Batman takes them out and heads into the mansion. Once inside, Batman begins seeing visions of a woman, an older woman, laying in bed as beetles crawl from her mouth. The beetles scatter the bed as a man holding a knife comes into the room and slits her throat, clutching the knife to his heart and telling her it was the only way to save her as she bleeds out in bed. Other visions would include Arkham's past, seeing Amadeus Arkham crying, swearing quote unquote she did it herself, and then in the next vision we just see blue flashes and smoke, followed by Amadeus telling someone that Hawkins couldn't stand his treatment before being arrested. I want to keep Amadeus' cell in the mansion, and there'd be one final vision where Batman sees Amadeus scratching his markings into the wall of his cell with his fingernails and muttering various things relating to the Asylum, Mad Dog Hawkins, the man who killed his family, and his mother's quote-unquote suicide. Throughout this whole mansion section, I wanted to try and retell the backstory of the Asylum. I'm not sure how these visions would work, whether they'd be set cutscenes or things that happen in gameplay. I'm leaning towards the latter, and there's something which wouldn't have to be included, but I feel as if the inclusion of them in the mansion makes sense, as this is basically ground zero for the madness which inhabits the island's very fibre, and it's a nice way to introduce new fans to that backstory, even if it is in a heavily condensed form, because I think we forget a lot of the time that Batman Arkham Asylum was such a massive game. It was a lot of people's first introduction to Arkham Asylum and the concept of it. And so I think here that could be a nice way to kind of introduce more people to this entity that is Arkham Asylum. These visions are brought about by the island's supernatural comic book bullshit, and I've always been a huge fan of the idea that Arkham Island, and specifically the mansion, are hotbeds for the supernatural, so we're going to lean into that a little bit here, not too much, I don't want to overdo it, and say these wouldn't have to be included, but I feel like it could be a nice little nod to a serious house on serious earth. Batman carries on through the mansion before getting to a large combat encounter, as Joker comes over the tannoy and tells Batman he knows what he's doing. He sees all. He even sees the fear in Batman's eyes. He's terrified. Something's not right with him tonight, and the island is going to see Batman snap one way or another. He has to snap. Everyone else here has, so why doesn't he just join them? He finishes by saying he's got a surprise for him. Joker has had Batman's quote-unquote nephew capture Dr. Young, but she won't talk about the formula, so his boys need to find it before it falls into the wrong hands. Batman has to fight his way through the Manor's first combat encounter, complete with obviously working metal detector, and makes his way over to the library, following the hallways which are just littered with villain memorabilia. Penguin's hat, Catwoman's whip, Two-Face's pistols, hell, throw a pot of clay in there, just have Arkham Mansion littered with these reminders of Batman's rogue gallery as he makes his way into the library to find thugs tearing the place apart. Batman goes in, clears house, and then Joker comes over the tannoy again and presents Batman with what he calls a small dilemma. Batman can either save the now 4 hostages below him, one of which is Aaron Cash, the same way we do in the main game, smashing through the glass using the chandelier, before a lurking Victor Zsasz, freed from his cell in intensive treatment by Harley Quinn, kills them. Or he can turn around and try to save Dr. Young from Two-Face, no. Catwoman, no. Calendar Man, no. Prometheus, maybe. No, Jim Gordon Jr., who's around 25 here. I'm going off the assumption Jim Gordon's about 50 and had both Jim and Barbara around the same time, maybe a few years apart between the ages of 25 and 30. Either way, someone's going to die. The 4 hostages, who consist of a couple of innocent guards and doctors, one of which is Aaron Cash, or Dr. Young. Now, I know what you're thinking. Jim Gordon Jr. didn't become a killer until 2011, and Arkham Asylum released in 2009, so that doesn't make any sense. Shut the fuck up. Okay, it's my story and I can play with the timelines as much as I want. Reality bends to my will in this video. In the same way I knew Firefly would make sense to attack Blackgate, and Bane would look like he does in a game which didn't release until 4 years after Arkham Asylum, I know Jim Gordon Jr. is a good fit for this game because he's twisted as shit and sets up a potential mission in my Batman Arkham City rewrite. So delete the comment you were going to type, Jim Gordon Jr. doesn't fit here. Shut up. It's my video, and that's the bottom line because Stone Cold said so. Didn't expect to make a Stone Cold reference in this video. Anyway, the player has to make a choice here. Either go about this the old-fashioned way, using the vents to get to the chandelier, cutting the rope and heading down through the hole to save them, with the addition of Victor Zsasz lurking around here. He gets taken out this time by a batarang to the head, and then gets knocked out by Batman and tied to a post. Or the other option is to leave the library and make a beeline for Quincy Sharp's office, where Young is being held. Either way, the player has a set amount of time to make the call. Going after the hostages below will result in you taking out Victor Zsasz permanently from the game and rescuing the hostages and Cash, with Cash telling you he doesn't know where the notes are but he's thankful Batman saved his ass again. This will send the player to Dr. Young's office, similar to the main game, having to pass Young's dead body on the way, as Batman apologises to her and closes her eyes before tracking her fingerprints from the office back to Quincy Sharp's office, who was fully compliant with the Titan program but had no idea it was for outside medical uses, before opening the top drawer in Sharp's desk, being blown to smithereens by a trap laid by Harley Quinn, who shows up and taunts Batman that they already found the formula and she has Sharp hostage. This would precede a combat encounter with a few thugs, a few of which wield the stun baton, and then we get our stun baton tutorial. Batman would overhear Harley telling a couple of thugs to take old Sharpie to the penitentiary, to be left with the rest of the lunatics, before she disappears. So obviously this is our next stop to save Sharp, and where Batman finds out about the secret lab in the gardens from Quinn. Batman would then be gassed through the vents by Scarecrow on the way out of the office, and that would lead into our second Scarecrow encounter. Going after Young, we'll see Batman have to navigate the manor, taking out a group of thugs before reaching Young and Jim Gordon Jr. in the Warden's office. This would be a hand-to-hand fight and would have Jim Gordon Jr. swing his blade wildly before entering a state of pure rage where Batman would just have to dodge his attacks and perhaps use his slightly more advanced movement to his advantage to escape Jim Gordon Jr. when he's in this state. After Batman takes Gordon out using a Batclaw slam, because spoiler alert, they're here now because I just think they're cool, the scene from the main game takes place with the added addition of the notes and the sequencing code for the gates to get into the Garden's secret lab being put in a drawer in Quincy Sharp's desk instead of the safe, just for some consistency between the two options. Young tells Batman she handed Sharp the note so he could approve the project's funding, because remember here, he was compliant, seeing it as a way to strengthen the willpower of patients to go through more stressful surgeries and therapies, which would in turn help him have a higher success rate, which would then boost his chances to become mayor. Young does not get blown up if she gets saved by Batman, because Batman opens the door and takes the brunt of the explosion. Batman wakes up, Stumbaton, enemies, Harley Quinn, Sharp, Scarecrow, you know how it goes. This choice forces Batman to, well, make a choice. Save 4 innocent lives, or 1, which in turn could save thousands. Either way, Batman loses, because he either loses his best lead on the formula and has to track it manually, which slows him down, only to find it's gone by the time he gets there, or he basically trades 4 lives for the sake of 1, in hopes that 1 can lead to saving thousands. I know either way the formula is gone, so you could say this choice is a complete illusion, and I fully understand that, because it is, but I think this choice is bigger than the formula in Batman's character arc here. Batman needs to realise that he can't save everyone and he can't save both of them, and has to decide which he values more. His working friendship with Cash and the other lives at risk, or his only hope of stopping Joker before it's too late. This choice is not made to have branching outcomes, come on, it's 2009 and we're Rocksteady, the king of linearity. The choice here is to break Batman's spirit a little bit, to plant that huge seed of doubt that he can't win tonight. He can take Joker down, but is that really winning when these innocent lives are lost because he can't save them? Because Joker is simply cornering him, keeping him on the back foot all night and putting him in situations he can't fight or think his way out of. There's a few little things I want to add to the mansion section as we come to the end of our time here and before we fight Scarecrow. I'd keep the secret room which points towards Arkham City, that's just fun, and then I'd add a couple of nice little hidden kind of boss fights for curious players against Victor Zsasz if they choose to save Young over Cash and the hostages. It isn't much, but it's a few hits and a few counters, and a final section where Batman grabs the knife, breaks Victor Zsasz's arm, and knocks him out for good, at least for tonight anyway. And the same would go for Jim Gordon Jr. Again, same thing, few punches, few counters, fight's over. These fights aren't needed to complete the story, but they could be fun little additions which wouldn't take much adding, but they just make the Asylum feel a bit more real and a little less Batman-centric. This would also help solidify these villains as both being reoccurring threats, because both will be appearing in a potential Arkham City sequel rewrite, one as a side content piece and the other as a main threat. Back in the mansion though, Batman walks through the fear gas on the way out of Sharp's office, and so begins our next trip down Crane Lane. The section begins relatively the same, with Batman walking down an infinite run of hallways which eventually leads into Crime Alley. We would relive Bruce's parents' deaths before playing as a young Bruce Wayne, who eventually turns back into Batman upon opening a door which takes us into a warehouse with a singular chair in the middle, which gets further and further away the closer we get. The warehouse doesn't have a floor. Looking down, all we see is an infinite abyss, and so we follow a trail of blood, similar to the section in Max Payne where Max has to follow his wife and child's blood trail to relive their murders, and once we navigate the blood trail we make it to the solid ground the chair is perched on. A mallet appears next to the chair, we look around and turn back, a claw appears next to it, then an umbrella, each item taking a part of the chair. Then a luchador mask appears on the chair, then a pistol scarred on one side, these items piling up next to the chair after they've taken their chunk of it. Batman can only stand and watch. The chair is then shot with the giant pistol, breaking it into chunks on the ground, broken and battered, before a batarang flies into the wreckage of the chair, lodging itself directly in the middle of the pile. Batman picks up the chair pieces and sheds a tear which hits the floor, reflecting a mask onto Batman's face, a domino mask which then shatters. The player turns around and they're in Scarecrow's world, with the bat signal needed to beat him atop the lighthouse. Batman begins making his way across the hellscape before coming across Scarecrow's newest trick, the skeleton army. Batman takes the skeletons down, taking one well-placed strike each to take out, and keeps moving, avoiding Scarecrow's gaze as he goes. Eventually Batman makes it to the lighthouse where he has to combine grappling and parkour to reach the signal, although certain parts of the lighthouse are crumbling, similar to the viaduct, and so it's possible for him to fall if the player makes the wrong choice. There would be small tells on which parts are solid and which aren't, but overall it would be a pretty tricky climb if RNG's is not on your side. But after reaching the top and avoiding Crane's gaze one last time, he gets blasted with the bat signal and pushed away once more. This is our first real introduction to the lighthouse, which is conveniently located just outside of the Penitentiary, and I wanted the lighthouse to be a really visually overpowering symbol of the island, almost as iconic as the mansion or intensive treatment, and so introducing it as a broken down scarecrow nightmare, for me at least, leaves that first reveal of the view from the very top when the nightmare is over to hit that much harder. I did have an idea for a piece of side content to take place on this lighthouse island. I won't be talking about that in this video because it's nothing to do with the main story, it's entirely separate. Just one little piece of side content which would come in at around 40 minutes for the player to complete, which would largely take place in and around the lighthouse and its island. So if you want to hear about that, I can make a separate video on that, or I'll just leave a description of it in the comments or whatever. If you guys want that, let me know down below, and I'll tell you. The player, though, then glides all the way down to the penitentiary and takes out the thugs attacking the doctor, or they can head down through the lighthouse, engaging in some light parkour and movement to get to the bottom. The lighthouse would be on an island, and so can be filled up with Riddler trophies, Chronicles of Arkham, etc, etc. But Batman enters the penitentiary and finds a pool of blood. We use detective mode scanner and scan the blood and find it belongs to Sharp, and so we begin tracking him, making our way through the halls, hearing the screams and the wails of inmates here. There are a few different looking enemies in the cell than what they're used to though. More upright, less lunatic-y, and certainly more armed. If they have one arm out of the straitjacket, then that arm is free to hold a weapon. Say hello to the straitjacket henchmen. This cut enemy type were left out of the initial game for unknown reasons, but we're bringing them back. They operate similar to the shorter, more deranged cousins, but have a little more brain function, using that extra grey matter to wield batons, sticks or pipes to whack the Dark Knight with. Little is known about how these guys would have worked, so we can have a little fun with them. I propose bringing the blade dodge takedown forward a game and having them run up to you and begin wildly swinging their weapons at Batman, who need to execute a perfectly timed blade dodge takedown to take the enemy down. I'd also implement the need to cape stun the thug from the high security henchmen, since I guess these guys are more high security? I don't know. They'd also have the stealthy capabilities of their deranged cellmates, often not being picked up by detective mode if and when the game calls for it. We'd meet Poison Ivy as per usual, but she'd be told to back off. We'd also meet Maxi Zeus, who resembles his electrically charged Sirius House on Sirius Earth counterpart. He gives Batman the same speech he did then, telling him his place at the AC/DC altar is ready, and he wants to get to know Batman in the form of a shower of sparks. Batman just kind of looks at Zeus and kind of retreats from his cell before his fear gas affected mind freaks out, seeing a bloodied crowbar stabbed into the wall and a torn yellow cape draping off it before snapping back into reality and carrying on following Sharp's trail. Batman can come across Clayface as per usual. He'll take the forms of Sharp, Gordon, and whoever you fail to save back in the mansion, so either cash or gun. And then we find Sharp as per usual. The same cutscene plays with Quinn skipping along, freeing Ivy and leaving, before Joker unleashes the lunatics into the asylum. When we cut back to Batman, he picks Sharp up by his collar, holding him against the cage, questioning him, telling him he knew about Titan, about Bane, about Young. He knew, and that this was all his fault. He let this happen, and for what, a better mayoral campaign? Batman's slipping here a bit. He's losing his mind. He's becoming more fierce and more accusatory. This isn't the Arkham Batman we're used to. He's emotional here. We see Batman driven by anger, similar to Origins. He's angry at Sharp, he's angry at Joker, at the senseless violence that's occurred on his watch. Batman snaps out of his rage, throwing Sharp to the ground, and continues to tell Sharp that Joker's in charge of the security, and the terminal and sequencer in Sharp's office are gone. Sharp hands Batman the other half of the sequencer and tells him it's useless, to which Batman just looks at Sharp and we get access to the cryptographic sequencer. It works the same, no point messing with it, I like the wiggly lines. I wanted Batman to be more emotional here, because one of the biggest gripes with Arkham Batman most of the time is that he's too stoic. He's too stone-faced in the face of life-changing events. And I think after tonight, and after the events he's been through so far, Batman would lose a bit of his cool. That's not to take away anything from the legendary Kevin Conroy. In fact, I think a more of an emotional Batman would work so well in tandem with his talents, and it's a side of Arkham Batman we don't see often, so I want to bring that in head here. Batman begins heading back through the penitentiary, running into the first lunatic, who's taken down the same, and the first straitjacket henchman, before finding Poison Ivy's cell empty. She's gone. Batman carries on through and finds Harley Quinn. Her job is to distract Batman while Joker packs up the Titan formula in the secret garden, and so she has Batman go through all of the trials and tribulations of the usual game, right up until the 3 electrified floor fight. Because honestly, without redoing the whole segment, doesn't get much better than this. I love the penitentiary so much. It's probably my favourite part of the game, and has some of the most memorable tension-filled moments for me. It's great. And hi there, again, another cut content intermission. I'd initially toyed with the idea of a boss fight in the penitentiary, more specifically, a Prometheus boss fight. He'd be released after Poison Ivy and be sent by Joker to keep Batman busy. The fight would have taken place within the same area as the fight where Harley Quinn swings above the pendulum, and I would love to tell you exactly what I had in mind for this fight, but I'm going to keep that under wraps, because we might see him in a sequel, and some of the ideas were pretty cool. I will say it was kind of a mixture of Deathstroke in Origins and Psycho Mantis from Metal Gear Solid, so make of that what you will, and you might see him later down the line. Anyway, we get to the electrified floor fight with Mr. Freeze's cell lurking in the background. And again, if anyone knows me, they'll know this fight is one of my favourites. It's simple but effective, and honestly, I love it, so this stays the same until Harley comes bounding out, and instead of Batman launching her into the steel railing, he just fucking clotheslines her to hell, like JBL style. Like, he just completely, like, wrenches back and just goes bang, and Harley Quinn does, like, 6 flips, and it's brutal, and it's also insanely funny. This changes nothing though, and the cutscene stays the same, with Harley's fingerprints being scanned, the party list being taken, and Harley being detained, before revealing she knows where the secret lab is, and so Batman selects the correct filter, filters Quinn's fingerprints, and begins heading towards the botanical gardens. On the way, Batman fights a few of the new enemy types, and these guys can attack in groups, I guess, because why not? Just something to spice it up a bit, and Batman finally reaches the botanical gardens. Ooh, I'm excited for this bit, seriously, this is the whole reason this video exists. So, Batman enters the botanical gardens, and he's largely the same until after the first stealth room, where Batman begins taking the guards down. He usually heads through the door to progress, but rather than being met with the Joker and the electrified water puzzle, usually requiring some backtracking unless you turn the power off first, Batman is met with a giant hedge maze. This is our introduction to the Mad Hatter. We have to make our way through the maze, which is being controlled by Poison Ivy, who's taken refuge in the gardens. The walls move, the paths change, and mind-controlled guards, thugs, lunatics, and straitjacket henchmen, whether it be by Mad Hatter or Ivy, will attack Batman as he navigates the maze. Batman continues around the maze, being attacked and jumped every step of the way until he reaches the middle, where Jervis sits, begging Batman to have some tea, because Alice can't get to him here. Batman just grabs Jervis and just stares at him. He just smoulders at him, like he just looks him in the eye, and he's like, Jervis, don't fuck with me. He then headbutts him, knocks him out, throws him to the floor, telling him he hasn't got any time for tea or Alice as he finds his way out of the maze. The maze, though, stays intact as we move on, because we might come back here later. Again, though, this stays the same. Batman tracks Quinn's fingerprints through the gardens and makes it to the Avery, and we get a similar stealth encounter to the one in the main game. Batman isn't allowed to be seen, because if he is, the man standing controlling the cages floating above the abyss will pull the switch and let them fall. The only difference is here, this is a real stealth room. There's no linear way to go about it, and any enemy can pull the switch, with not a single person manning the switch. So by changing the layout of the room, we can make it so the player has to hit them hard and fast, not letting the enemies find each other's bodies or make it to the control room switch. This just ups the ante a little. It's not as tense as the initial fight, and it's not much of a change, but it's one I quite enjoy. Batman saves the doctors and confirms the secret Titan lab is nearby. We find it, hack it, and enter it before coming face to face with old Mr. J. Joker taunts us, telling him he's already got enough of the formula to enact his plan. He tells Batman he's failed, and that when tonight's over, Batman will finally join him in madness as he's driven to his absolute limits. After all, he can only just about deal with one Bane. Never mind 1,000. He begins laughing as two of his henchmen are injected with Titan, and we get the usual dual Titan fight, but with one small twist. The Titan formula has been improved since the last fight, and the pair of Titans now follow Joker's instructions over the tannoy, cornering Batman, resisting Batman's moves, and even duping him out with the Batarang charge segments. They'll scream, run, and when you throw Batarang, they'll just knock it out of the way or it'll get lodged in their arm, kind of like a shield. This happens a few times a fight and just keeps the player on edge a little, and after the fight's over, the Titan thugs both die, showing the formula isn't quite honed yet, but it's getting better. Batman takes a sample of one of the thugs' blood and finds it mixed with a plant, also given away by the plant underfoot in this room, and so Batman figures that the resident botanist around here will have to help him find the plant and create an antidote, or her plants will all die. Batman destroys the Titan facility using nefarious means, certainly not the explosive gel, and calls in our next gadget, the line launcher. And here he begins tracking Ivy using her unique pheromone trace. Batman heads through the gardens, taking out some Ivy-controlled thugs here and some normal thugs there, and eventually reaches Ivy, and the scene plays out the same, with Ivy ultimately telling Batman there's one place the plant he needs grows. That is in Killer Croc's lair. Batman tells her to go back to her cell, or she'll be next, and so he begins heading to Croc's lair. On the way out of the gardens, we can hear Ivy being injected with Titan by Joker, causing her plants to freak out and become enraged, and this lines up with when we enter the garden maze. A cutscene of a thug trying to find his way through the maze plays, and eventually he's injected by one of Ivy's plants with an unstable Titan strain which blinds him but enhances his other senses, making him a mindless brute with enhanced smell and hearing as a gas fills the room. Harmless to Batman, but harmful to Signals. This section takes heavy inspiration from the Berserker fight in the first Gears of War. In that game, you have to lure a Berserker, who's a basically giant, bulletproof, blind, rage-filled beast with enhanced senses, through a building, and eventually you have to lure her outside to kill her with the Hammer of Dawn, which is basically a giant sky death laser. The Berserker charges at you, and you have to dodge out of the way. Here, though, Batman doesn't always know where the Titan thug is, due to, obviously, detective mode being blocked. The thug would be able to break through walls and hear Batman should he be too loud, ultimately ending with Batman luring the thug over to the entrance of the garden before he uses the Sonic Batarang to deafen him and ultimately knock him out after getting the jump on him. This whole section could really lean into the horror element and the tension that comes with Batman being the hunted. It puts him firmly on the back foot and means you, the player, has to think on their feet and manipulate the thug to the front door. Batman gets out onto the island and Ivy's plants begin taking over, but here there are no spore shooters. Why? Because fuck them, that's why. Instead, Ivy has taken over the minds of the less stable members of Arkham Island, those being any enemy that got out of the Penitentiary. They get faster, more aggressive and more violent in their attempts to take anyone and everything down, even other thugs, meaning that they can be used and manipulated to your advantage, which could be pretty fun. Apart from that, literally nothing changes here. I won't bore you with the continued story here, because it's the same as the main game. Rather, I'll take you through some key moments and changes to the end of the sewer section. So Batman makes it to the end of intensive treatment, and eventually ends up being gassed by Scarecrow. And this stays the same, except this time the tannoy says, "I'll be your Robin." We get the fake crash and whatnot, and after Batman breaks out of his grave, there's a grave next to his, which is inscribed with JT and a crowbar lent up against it. And we get into the final Scarecrow section, where rather than hiding from his gaze, we fight a nightmare-induced version of Scarecrow, which resembles his new Batman Adventures look, mixed with his Injustice 2 look, just to really amp up that fear factor. This fight takes place in an arena, and Scarecrow brings in skeleton thugs as he begins to hack Batman with a scythe, which Batman has to blade dodge and snap in half eventually. After this first phase, we then drop through the floor and begin the stealthy part of the fight, where Batman first has to walk through a hallway of his greatest failures. Jason dying, Barbara being shot, Alfred nearly dying, Harvey being made into Two-Face, his parents' death. All of these events Bruce holds himself partly responsible for. At the end of the corridor, we see Joker, who just pulls out a gun which Batman can't counter, and he dies. The game over screen has Bruce Wayne come on screen and tell the player they failed him before they reloads back into the game, into the usual Scarecrow stealth encounter, which ends with Batman using the line launcher to fling himself into Scarecrow, taking him down. Okay, I know the Jason Todd references have gotten a little less obvious as the story's gone on, but for me, this works as Batman slowly ventures into madness and he begins reliving these events. And considering this is where Jason was tortured for a while, although in my universe he was tortured in a warehouse after the initial capture and few days, it seems right Batman would have flashes of this. And if the Cardi Batman Arkham game rewrite universe is to survive and thrive, it needs to lay its foundations early and canonise Jason Todd officially now. Batman takes Scarecrow down and Crane runs for Killer Croc's lair to drop the fear gas into the water. This scene plays out the same, except Croc comes after Batman too, bringing him into the water with himself and Crane. Batman escapes by jamming a batarang into Croc's collar, which both electrocutes him and partially deafens him. Batman escapes into Croc's lair with Crane not having such good luck, and we get a similar fight as before. Very stealth-based and very maze-like. I feel like I've done a lot of stealth-based fights throughout this rewrite, but I feel like that works so much better with Asylum's overall tone, and the idea that for once, Batman isn't the predator. Tonight, he really is the prey. Batman gets what he needs, with Croc jumping out of the water here and there, before Batman manages to find his way out of the lair. He finds himself running from Croc and gets stuck at the gate out. Batman lifts the gate up just enough to roll out, and as it drops, it traps Croc's arm, impaling him. Croc manages to lift the gate up, and he lunges at Batman, who manages to roll under Croc's attack before ripping a spike from the gate and impaling Croc in a last gasp attempt to get him off his back, sending Wayland back into the water. Now, there's a few ways this could work in gameplay, and I'm not sure if it even would, but I'm sure Rocksteady could do something with it. I was thinking maybe a section similar to the original Bane fight, with Croc charging at Batman, and the objective is to simply survive the flurry until Croc hits enough of the foundation to loosen a spike in the gate for Batman to use. Batman uses the viaduct to get to the surface again, but this time there are no little jaunts to stop Joker poisoning Gotham's water supply, because that part of the game always annoyed me. Rather, Batman has to get through a gauntlet set up by Joker. A stealth room, a combat room, and then into the enclosed Titan fight, where the Titan is just as smart as a normal thug, hitting Batman when he's vulnerable and taunting him, showing the formula's completion. Joker has Titan, but worse than that, he has Titan that works well. This is a setup in a way where the player gets very little rest and really tests them and makes them use all of their gadgets and skills. Batman goes through hell here, and it's the final massive test before the Ivy fight. Batman makes it through the gauntlet and gets back to the Batcave to synthesize a cure, but is only able to synthesize enough for 2 uses. Ivy's plants attack the Batcave as Batman grabs the... just kidding, there's no more gadgets yet. Explosive Gel and Ultra Batclaw for this rewrite are useless. I've never really enjoyed the Ultra Batclaw. It seems a bit gimmicky to have for one boss fight and to pull down walls during optional side content. And as for Explosive Gel, it's a shame a gadget so iconic doesn't make it into the first game in the series, but it just doesn't have enough real practical use for me in Arkham Asylum. Vents and doors are more than sufficient for Batman to traverse, so quite frankly, it can stay on the bench for now. Batman leaves the Batcave to inject Ivy with one of the cures for the Titan strain to stop her reign of madness, and as he makes it to just outside the Botanical Gardens, a plant grabs Batman and flings him in the air, enough for him to glide down into the boss fight against Ivy, where this time the fight would take place much quicker. One issue I've always had with the Ivy boss fight is that it feels like it drags on for ages. So this time she only has 1 health bar and Batman just punches through her shielding to break it before finally breaking through and injecting her with the cure, killing her Titan enhanced plants before grappling out of the Botanical Gardens as we enter the final act. Another quick intermission before we talk about the Joker boss fight and thus our final bit of gameplay. I wanted to touch on some of the cut content that didn't make it into the final version of my rewrite. Firstly, a cut location called Chapel Rock, which featured an inmate graveyard, crypt, a chapel area, and an area called Twisted Willow. And apparently the Batcave was originally located underneath the island in Chapel Rock. It's unknown how big of a role it would play in the final game, but it got scrapped either because the game was too big or due to limited development time, and it later got merged with the main island, with the Batcave being placed on Dead Man's Point and the graveyard being located next to Arkham Mansion. Mr. Freeze was also going to be included in the game, but he too got scrapped because he just wouldn't fit within the game's narrative, which is fair enough. His cell can still be found in the Asylum's Penitentiary and is used as a riddle answer. I had a brief outline for how I'd use Mr. Freeze, having him manufacture the cure for the Titan, but it just didn't work out with me wanting to make Batman as experienced as possible, because having Freeze manufacture the cure is one, clearly a plot beat from Arkham City, and two, I feel like it diminishes Batman's intelligence a bit. Next up, we have alternate collectibles, which both myself and Rocksteady left out, keeping the Riddler as the primary and only collectibles in the game. Mentioned in a Game Informer magazine, and according to models in the 2007 build, Riddler trophies were not supposed to be the only collectibles on Arkham Island, as there were also supposed to be Joker spray cans, Two-Face coins, and Croc scales that were supposed to be found around the map. It's also worth mentioning that these collectibles would have contributed to upgrading gadgets. This was most likely removed as it would have been way too tedious, and the final upgrade system was fine as it was. That's what didn't make it in. I really wanted to try and include Chapel Rock because it's so cool, but the thought of adding another island beside the lighthouse felt a bit like overkill, and as for the other collectibles, that's not really what we're here to do. So, let's get back into the story and go find the Joker. Joker comes over the tannoy and tells Batman it's time, the party is about to start. Fireworks fill the sky and guide the Dark Knight home like a gleeful runway. Batman enters the visitor centre and obviously fights the thugs lining the hallway before coming to face with Mr. J. Batman tells Joker, who's sitting atop a pile of rubble holding a comically large pistol with needles loaded into it, to stop all the madness. This is enough. He's finished. He will be stopped. And the Joker simply replies saying, "Enough madness. Enough." And how do you measure madness? Sometimes it's only madness that makes us what we are. My dearest delusional Dark Knight, look at us. We're not so different, are we? Batman tells Joker to go to hell before Joker continues on saying, "We're already in hell, me and you, stuck in our own minds. The war's closing in on us. We aren't like them bats. You know, sometimes, I think the Asylum is a head. We're inside a huge head that dreams us all into being. Perhaps it's your head, Batman. Arkham is a looking glass, and we are all reflections of you. The very people you throw in here are reflections of you." Joker gets more serious, almost Ledger-like, and continues in sort of a WWE promo kind of way. He says, "And look at what you do to us. To them. You've put Bane in a coma. You've thrown Harley around. That's my hobby, by the way. You fed the good doctor to Croc and then skewered him. And what about poor JJ? Such a shame his night got brought to such a swift end. What do you think about JJ, Jim?" Joker brings down Commissioner Gordon, who he took as hostage from the medical facility, and he jumps down from his throne of rubble, circling Batman, who stands and lets him monologue. "See, Bats, this whole night has been for you. I did this for you. And the Titan, well, that's plan B. Because you see, there's always a plan B. I wanted you to see what we are. We're the cause of an unfair world, and in an unfair world, sometimes the House of Cards doesn't always get built. Instead it lays, strewn across the floor, splattered across the ground, like a brainstem after a rough day. Do you see, Bats? We need each other to build that House of Cards. Without each other, we're empty. So I brought you here tonight to try and make you like us, because deep down you are. You always have been." Batman watches as Joker walks away, grabbing Gordon and holding the large gun to the back of his head and pulling the trigger. Batman lunges at Gordon and Joker as Joker jumps back, watching Batman try and talk Gordon out of the transformation into a Titan-fueled monster, before quickly injecting him with the cure. He can't let Gordon change. He uses his last cure, he can't fail another one of his family. Joker begins talking again. He says, "Hey Bats, let's just calm down here. You want to hear a joke?" See, there were these two guys in a lunatic asylum, and Batman lunges at Joker before beating the holy hell out of him. Joker manages to create some distance and feigns an injury, telling Batman he's beaten, Batman's won, before he injects himself with Titan and begins transforming. Painfully, slowly, his limbs stretching out, his spine leaving the confines of his skin, until, as Batman ushers Gordon out of the visitor's centre and tells him to call for all of the backup he can, almost desperately, Joker's final form takes shape. A twisted, spider-like, mutated beast, the stuff of nightmares standing on its hind legs, moving in an almost disjointed sort of way, like all of his limbs have 6 extra joints. Batman takes a step back and Joker says, "What, don't like my new suit?" Before he begins sprinting at Batman, throwing his huge spindly arms at Batman, who grabs it as another arm takes Batman out and he takes the fight to the roof. To get away with the Titan Joker still existing, although I toyed with him not turning into the Titan form at all, but I enjoy a challenge and making this fight fun is the greatest challenge of all, we needed this to be an actual fight, so for the boss fight, Batman and Joker actually go one-on-one. Thugs come in to help Joker, so technically it isn't one-on-one, but for the most part, we fight Joker on the roof at the visitor centre as helicopters, both news and police, circle the island. My concept for the reworked fight is that Joker does not leave the arena once. He doesn't grandstand, he's just focused on breaking Batman down and proving he's insane. He taunts Batman about the night's events, about how he's so close to seeing the real Batman, and this is how he's going to do it. He's going to humiliate him in front of Gotham and make him go insane. Mechanically, the idea I had was to have Joker swing his giant arms at Batman, who'd have to, instead of just running away in a circle, you would have to time counters and blade dodges. Joker delivers slow but devastating claw swipes. Batman can dodge or perfectly time a cape stun to create an opening. Joker can then leap at Batman, and if dodged at the last second, Joker crashes into the ground, giving Batman a window for counterattacks, and after every successful dodge, Batman gets a few free hits, but the Joker quickly adapts. The goal is to keep moving, counter smartly, and avoid getting cornered, because if you do, the Joker will pick Batman up, and even on easiest difficulty, throw him into the nearest wall, which deals half a bar of health damage. Like, this fight, seriously, this is the hardest fight in the game. Joker's enhanced strength makes him a demon. Even with all armor upgrades, I want Joker to be the hardest fight in Batman Arkham Asylum. After dealing enough damage, Joker lunges and tries to crush Batman with both of his hands, kind of like a clap. Batman counters by grappling up and landing onto Joker's back, landing a flurry of punches to his back before flipping off. Joker grows frustrated and starts mixing up attacks. He becomes faster and more erratic, forcing Batman to stay agile. The next phase of the fight sees Joker lowers his shoulder and charge. Dodging at the last moment makes Joker slam into a wall, dazing him for a short combo. He'll also try to grab Batman. If caught, a quick time button mash event lets Batman slip free, but failing results in Joker slamming him to the ground for, again, massive damage. Joker can also unpredictably lunge forward, like out of nowhere, there's no tell. You really have to rely on your reactions here, and Batman must dodge twice in quick succession to open Joker up for a few hits. Joker starts faking attacks because he's the Joker, and he starts laughing manically as Batman dodges quote-unquote nothing, using these little feints to confuse both Batman and the player. It also keeps the player looking like a clown, and to finish this phase, Joker winds up for like a massive haymaker, and Batman counters it by grappling onto Joker's arm, wrapping his own arm around his neck, as Batman brings Joker down for a nice combo. The final phase begins with Batman and Joker exchanging a couple of words, and Batman putting batarangs in between his fingers like claws, because why not? Joker's attacks become relentless. He doesn't give a player the moment to rest here. Joker launches into a flurry of attacks, forcing Batman to dodge in kind of rhythm, like blade dodge combos, and successfully avoiding the combo lets Batman counter with a flurry of attacks himself. And after wearing Joker down, Batman mounts Joker and begins throwing punches left and right until ultimately Joker is knocked out, letting out one more little laugh before he goes down for good, smiling as he does. If there's any enemies still remaining, the player has to take them out, because it's always irked me when you beat a boss in a boss fight and there's still enemies and suddenly they just disappear for the cutscene, and if not, the fight ends here with Joker slowly losing his Titan form. Batman stands up, removes the Batarang from his hands, and turns around, leaving the arena. We cut to Batman and Gordon outside of the visitor centre, and we get the same in-game scene of Arkham Asylum being secured again, with GCPD, guards and doctors finally regaining control of the asylum. Guards find Croc bleeding but alive, surviving the impaling as Batman knew he would, right? Ivy is sedated and put back in a cell. Quinn is left in a cell for a brief moment of comedy as the guards walk up to the cell and just kind of look at each other and agree that she's pretty secure, and then leaves. Bane is found in a smaller form, limping his way to the gate of the asylum before being brought down by tasers, collapsing to his knees and brought back to the asylum. And the rest of the enemies are brought back to the asylum or finally moved to Iron Heights. All of this as a voiceover from Quincy Sharp begins, before we cut to him at a press conference. He tells the press about a new, safer vision for Gotham. If he's elected as the people's mayor, he promises to secure Gotham's future, as he unveils Arkham City. The slums of Gotham will be walled off, its inhabitants move to safe, secure homes, as the scum of Gotham are moved in. But this is only possible if the people vote for Sharp. A vote for Sharp is a vote for Gotham. We cut back to Batman and Gordon as the two share a couple of words. Gordon thanking Batman for saving him and Gotham again. Batman just shakes his hand and leaves, walking to the Batmobile before driving off through the gate. In almost a reverse of the opening scene, it pans out as we get a nice view of Gotham as the Batmobile roars through the street. We cut to Joker being dragged back into the asylum as he laughs manically, saying, "Parting is such sweet sorrow, Bats. Still, you can't say we didn't show you a good time. Enjoy yourself out there in the asylum. Just don't forget, if it ever gets too tough, there's always a place for you here, back at home." As the scene cuts and the credits roll, bringing Batman Arkham Asylum to an end. In a post-credit scene, we see Scarecrow's hand grab a crate of Titan just off the coast of Gotham, his hand mangled and broken. And there it is, the Batman Arkham Asylum cut content rewrite. Let me know what you think, subscribe. I hope you enjoyed so much, because I really enjoyed making this, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.